Good afternoon, and welcome to this European webinar on gender equality statistics and strategies in audiovisual production. We have interpretation in English, French, and Spanish for the people attending online. And you can use the little button at the bottom of your screen to choose the interpretation channel. Because this session is recorded and because we have expecting quite a lot of people online, we have not given permission to the participants online to open their microphone and video, but you can interact with us by using the chat. So please do so to ask any questions you might have during the session, to put any comments, or also to share resources, because we found that those sessions are also very interesting for us to collect information from the many people in the room. So as I said, the session is recorded and it will be available for replay on the website of our partner, Cine Europa, where you will also find an article reporting on the discussions. So some people might be joining as I speak. So again, apologies if you can't open your mic and video, but the idea is that we keep the room as quiet as possible so that we can record a clean version of the session. So I would like to warmly welcome you to this event. My name is Daphne Tepper. I'm Policy Director at the Media, Entertainment and Art sector of Uni Europa, which is an organization that brings together trade unions representing workers in many services sectors in Europe. And I work in particular in the media, entertainment and art sector, and we represent workers behind screens and stages in Europe. And my organization, with a number of other European organizations, and you see all the logos on your screen right now, have been organizing this event for several years already. It's actually already the 5th edition. And those European organizations, what we really wanted to do is keep an eye on the gender equality statistics that we have been collecting more and more regularly and in a broader way in the last years, and I think that's a real achievement. But it is really important, as you all know, when you collect statistics, to keep an eye on it, to keep looking at progress and evolutions and possible steps back, and also to keep reflecting on the data and maybe also adjusting the type of data that we are collecting. So let me introduce the other partners of this session. We're extremely glad to work with EVA, the European Women's Audiovisual Network, which is a very well-known network of professionals in the film sector that are striving for more gender equality and diversity in Europe. We're also very happy to partner in this event with EFAD, which is the European Film Agency Directors Association, film centers across Europe. We also organized this event in partnership with our sister unions federation, FIA, the International Federation of Actors, as well as the Federation of European Screens Director, FERA. We finally are very, very glad to partner with both the European Audiovisual Observatory and the Lab Femmes de Cinéma, who will present today, as they did in the last editions, their most recent reports on gender equality in European production. So I will give you a very short overview of what will be discussed and who will we hear from during this meeting. So this is our agenda. Very shortly, I will welcome Emma Rafowicz, who is a newly elected member of the European Parliament. We will then hear, as I said, from the Lab, the European Audiovisual Observatory and the Lab Femmes de Cinéma. And then we will have an exchange with the different partners of this project, but also sector stakeholders about reflecting upon the numbers, and the information will be informed of. So we will hear from insight from 2 European countries on how we can evaluate the impact of equality strategies on the film and on our European production. And then we will also exchange with our partners in this event on the state of play. As you will see, we have now a bit of a perspective on numbers and on the evolution, and we will ask ourselves if we are happy with the direction of travel. How do we understand the situation, and any lessons learned for future actions? So I will now give the floor to our first speaker, Mrs. Emma Rafowicz. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for your invitation.
Yes, it's an honor, it's a pleasure. You are a member of the European Parliament from the S&D group coming from France. I know you're a feminist, and you are also a very, very close to the cultural sector, and also you're a member of 2 very important committees in the European Parliament. You are Vice Chair of the Committee on Culture and Education, and you're also a member of the Committee on Women's Rights and Gender Equality. So for us, it's really amazing that you accepted our invitation to speak today. So thank you for being here, and I give you the floor.
Thank you so much. Well, with great pleasure, I am with you today. I'm really happy to be with you, and I obviously want to thank you and all the organizations which made this moment possible for all of us. Obviously, it is focused today on a fundamental issue, advancing gender equality in the European audiovisual production. Indeed, despite rich cinematic heritage in Europe and a thriving ecosystem, what we can say is that, well, the sector remains uneven and unequal for women, for all. Now, I think, and you said it at the beginning of a new mandate, is, I think, the moment to push a bit more and to go, obviously, further. We have to state the facts, and I'm not going to be very long because I know that after me, some of you are going to talk about that and give us some numbers, but we have to say that today only 26% of European directors are women, and it is obviously something that needs to be challenged. Similar gaps obviously exist and persist in cinematography, but it is the same in production, is the same in editing. And while some countries have made progress more for some than for others, but especially Nordic countries, but we can also speak about Ireland, about Spain, about Croatia or others, the trend is unfortunately a bit clear. Female talent, as we can maybe call it, is not moving up the ladder as the rate we'd expect and as quick as we would want. So what now can we do? We need, I do believe, targeted but also measurable strategies to address the full pipeline, and it begins from education and training, and it goes all the way to distribution and recognition. And obviously, it's also about fighting gender-based and sexual violence in the industry, and it's something that is really important. Not forgetting, obviously, the gender pay gap, which is also a really important matter. So to begin, maybe, and to say a few ideas, and maybe to then make you continue and explain to all of us what is for you the solutions. For early intervention and training, I think that we have to start in the classrooms. We have to start in the schools. It is something today that is a really we are rich of schools and of great cinema schools in Europe, but we have to do more to allow maybe to have gender-targeted scholarships and to promote the arrival of women in this industry, and to go even further for hiring practices, for transparent and inclusive hiring practices. We have to try to create new tools to eliminate biases in these processes. probably developing, for example, anonymous CV, which is also something that could be used to target discrimination and racism in the industry. Obviously, create new funding things. We have obviously, we are fortunate in Europe to have national film institutes and support mechanisms that are really developed, that allow us as Europeans to have incredible cinemas and incredible audiovisual industry. All of those mechanisms, I think, need to exist with conditions of parity, of gender equality. When we have institutes or support mechanisms that have included obligations and new obligations, it has worked. It has been seen, obviously, in France, but also in Austria. And I know that we will talk about that later, but it's something, I guess, and I think really important. Then, of course, development of mentorship, links between women in this industry, obviously challenging always stereotypes and trying to deconstruct gender-based stereotypes. We have to create also, obviously, good way to end the gender pay gap, in the industry. And for that, in the new mandate, I think we will have to develop new instruments to make the directive on the gender pay gap, I mean, even more efficient, and especially in the cinema industry. And obviously, and today is an important day because in France opens up the trial of violence, sexual abuse in France today in cinema with Adèle Haenel. I think we have to acknowledge that the Me Too movement started off in the cinema and audiovisual industry, and it has been a wave of a lot of things, I think, positive and important things for feminists across Europe and across the world. And today we have to do everything that we can to stop the omerta from existing, to actually do things to avoid women from getting away from the passion that they have because they are scared of violence or other things in this industry. And for that, cinema and the audiovisual industry has been an example. At first, it has to be an example also at the end to actually and clearly fighting sexual violence and gender-based violence in this industry. I maybe want to say at the end of this opening remarks that we are obviously in the European Parliament at your disposal, and that we want to work with you in the Cult Committee, in the FEM Committee, to make sure that the audiovisual industry is a place that is safe for women, but also a place that is an example for gender equality. And obviously the work that you will do today, but I know that it's not the first time that you work on that subject, and the work that you will continue to do after. I want to say that we are there to obviously discuss every day, exchange view, and also, I hope, make it a reality at the European level. Thank you so much for your invitation, and I can't wait from hearing everyone speak and saying, I think, really important things for the next years. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I think you really summarized very well where we are and where we have to go. And it's great to know that we have allies in the European Parliament that see and understand the situation. And also, so I think for all the organization behind this event, I really also want to say that we are, of course, working on that issue for many years, and happy to also help and connect and bring in information and expertise from the sector to continue progressing on that road. So thank you very much once again, and it's the start of the conversation, I'm pretty sure. We're going to move to the first presentation of today's webinar. And so I will invite Gilles Fontaine, Head of the Department for Market Information at the European Audiovisual Observatory. Hello, Gilles. Nice to see you, and thank you for being with us today. So it's a tradition now You're very kind at the observatory to always respond positively to our invitation to present your latest statistics on gender equality to this event and to our group and all the stakeholders online. So thank you very much, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. It's now indeed almost a tradition. And unfortunately, it's also a tradition of sharing data, which is not that pleasant. So I will indeed share the latest data from the observatory. I will have 4 chapters in my presentation. First, where do we stand in global figures, and how did it evolve over the last years? Then I will do some insight on some particular figures which seems to me of interest. I will leave the European level to try to spot countries where progresses are made. And finally, I will do a short comparison with what's happening in the TV fiction production sector. So to do that, I'm going to share my screen. You should see it. And just before getting to the point, I will just recall rapidly the scope of what I will be talking about. That's the scope of the report we are doing each year. We are monitoring gender equality for 6 off-screen roles: directors, writers, producers, cinematographers, composers, and editors. We have been looking at data since 2015, and it means that in our sample we have over 16,000 theatrical European films, and it represents about 54,000 professionals from all these roles. And when I talk about Europe, I'm talking about Europe in the sense of the Council of Europe, meaning the wider Europe. So let's go first at the situation in 2023. And if you combine all the roles I have been mentioning, the situation in 2023 is that the share of women in off-screen production of film is 24%, with, as you can see, strong variations between the 6 roles we have been monitoring, and a situation which is particularly bad as regards cinematographers and composers. So that's 24% is basically the result of the combination of these 6 roles. What has been the evolution since we monitor gender equality in off-screen position? Well, it has grown, but it has grown really, really slowly. It's basically since 2015 plus 5% when looking at the proportion of women, again aggregating within those 6 categories. And the increase has been slow, and our figures suggest that the increase is on top of it slowing since 2021. Of course, the situation varies between the different roles that we have been looking at. But basically, when you compare between the different roles, you tend to conclude that for the role which started at a lower rate of gender equality, the growth is still going on. But if you look at roles which started with a higher proportion of women, and I'm talking about editors, producers, and to an extent writers, the figures seems to be stagnating. So I don't know, and I'm almost afraid of using that word. I don't know if we are facing a ceiling, but at least for the production, for some of the categories, there is no longer an increase. So that's where for the global figures, not good, as I was saying, 24% of women as in the 6 positions in 2023. I would like to draw your attention and maybe trigger a discussion on some particular figures. Here I'm looking at directors, and I see that there is an interesting phenomenon, maybe a promising one, which is that when you focus on debut films, any debut films between 2015 and 2023, the share of women directing is significantly higher than for all film on average. So maybe there is a process at work whereby the renewal, I would say, of the population of the directors, that could be a trigger to better increasing the overall rate. That's why we are monitoring this indicator of debut film. But on the other hand, please note that even for debut film, we are not at 50% or at 40%, we are at 35%. So it's better, but it's still not gender equality. That was my first insight about debut film. The second aspect, which is important to take into account when looking at our figure, is the strong connection in the data between gender equality in directors and gender equality in screenwriters, for a very simple reason, is that for a large majority of theatrical films, the director is also a writer. So when looking at the specific situation of the writer, it should be taken into account that very often we are talking basically of the same person. And indeed, when you look at the structure of the screenwriting team, meaning when there is not only one writer, but several writers, here the situation is better. Put it in another way, the parity situation as regards directing has so far a very strong influence as regards the situation in writing, because again, we are talking about the same person very often. Two indicators which indirectly talk about budgets. So, 2023 situation, all directors, 26% of directors are women. Then, if we do the same calculation, but only limited to the top 100 European film by admissions, we have a lower proportion of women directing. To me, it's a strong hint that the budgets to which women have access as directors are lower than on average for all directors. So that's the first hint. And the second one is when looking at the difference in terms of proportion of women directing by genre of films. And here, behind the 26% on average, you see a much higher proportion of women in documentaries than in live action fiction. So the 26% for directors, again, mean that basically it's more about over 30% for the documentaries, and it's more 20% for live action film. Again, to me, more women in documentary, meaning also more women in lower budget films. And the final insight I wanted to share before moving to the other sections is that I find it interesting that when there is a woman directing a film, the proportion of women in the other positions is higher, basically. So how to write this slide? If you take into account all directors, you have about 30% of writers. But if you limit to films with a woman director, you have 70% of writers. let's be careful about this result. As I said, regarding writers, there are limits, because it's basically the result is also the fact that when a woman is a director, she is also going to be the writer very often. Still, in all categories, you see the same phenomenon. And my point here is that it is likely that, for instance, an increase in the share of women directing may have positive results also in the other roles. So these were the 4 particular points I wanted to raise, and I would like now to move to a more country-by-country approach, and trying to understand which countries are doing best. This slide lists in each role the top 5 countries by share of women share of assignment for each of the 6 roles. So you see many different names. There are 15 different countries in the table, but still, if you look a little bit more in detail, there is clearly a pattern. And the pattern is that Nordic countries, and that's not a surprise, but I would like to bring the data to confirm it, are clearly represented, overrepresented, I would say, when you look at the top 5 countries for each category. So you have the Nordic countries plus Germany and Austria. These are the countries which stand out when you measure the 2023 snapshot situation. Another way to look at country is to look at countries which have made more progresses. They are not necessarily yet in the top 5, but still, when you compare 2015 with 2023, it's interesting to see which of them have made more progresses. And that's, again, the full list. And when you take a closer look at the list, you find again the Nordic countries. It means that the Nordic countries not only have reached a higher point, but also that they have progressed most. So the Nordic countries are not at a high point because they were very strong or very equal at the beginning, but also because they have made a lot of progresses at the same time. And then you can see also that there is a number of other countries which, again, are not necessarily in the top 5, but which made significant increase during the time period. And I'm talking about Ireland, Spain, Croatia, and to a lower extent about Slovenia, Estonia, and Hungary. Again, they are not necessarily in the top 5, but the differences between 2015 and 2023 is notable, I would say. For this presentation, and that's not in our report, I tried to have a look at what's happening outside Europe. And I wanted to share that it has been highly challenging to find easy to compare. I have looked at the USA, but here all stats basically only relate to the top grossing films. For a series of countries, I have kind of comparative data, which is interesting. That's for Argentina, Korea, and so on. And I have also 2 interesting statistics regarding maybe 2 countries outside of Europe, which may be interesting to look at. That's Canada on the one hand and Australia on the other hand. The stats about the share of women director is particularly high in these 2 countries, Canada and Australia. Of note that we are talking only about the films which got public funding, but still, as a policy from a public funding agency, I found the results quite impressive, personally. And my last point is to do a comparison with fiction produced for television or for SVOD. Here we find a slightly better situation for TV and SVOD fiction than for theatrical films, and a slightly better situation since basically there have been a boom of TV and SVOD fiction in Europe. My hypothesis, it's just an hypothesis, is that there was some, to put it that way, some kind of door opening due to the boom in production in TV and SVOD fiction, while at the same time the level of production in film remained quite stable. And if you look at it a little bit more in details, I'm making also some hypotheses. I think as regard writers of TV and SVOD fiction, what we see at the observatory is that in TV and SVOD fiction, unlike in film, the director is not the writer most of the time. So I would say that there was a positive effect of the disconnection between directing and writing, meaning that there was more room for female writers as the space was not fully occupied by the directors of the TV series. That's my first hypothesis. And my second hypothesis is that also as regard producers, again, the boom in the volume of TV and SVOD fiction gave the possibility to new producers to enter the market, and therefore maybe an explanation why the gap and the difference is so high as regard producers between film and TV fiction production. These are hypotheses, but that's at least how I read the figures. I am done with my presentation. Much more figures, but I guess I shared already a lot, if you wish, in the two reports which we publish each year on gender equality, one in theatrical film production and the other one regarding TV SVOD production. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gilles. Thank you for those numbers. They are not good numbers, but it's great that we have them, and it's great to have your expertise and analysis of them. Really, I think it's extremely valuable, and I also think it's great that we're really grateful also for the way you broaden the collection of the data and you cross analyze the numbers. So I think it's extremely useful. I don't see any questions in the chat right now. I invite people in the room. If at any point you also want to come in, you're very welcome. Are you staying? Can you stay with us, Gilles, in case there are questions coming up at a later stage?
Of course.
Yes, super. So let's do that. I propose that we now go to the second presentation because they are very complementary. And I think that's the whole idea, right? And you will tell us that, Lise and Fabienne. But I will now invite Fabienne Sylvestre, co-founder and director of the Lab Femmes de Cinéma, and Lise Perrotet, who is the general coordinator of the lab, to present your study, the 2024 edition of your qualitative study on the existing measures to promote parity in cinema in Europe. And I'll let you give us all the details. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Daphne. Hello, everybody. We're very glad to be here today with you. I'd start with a big thanks to the various organizations behind this roundtable. It's an important moment as it has become year after year one of the rituals for parity in the film industry. Thanks to the statistics that Gilles has just presented, we know for sure that we are still a long way from achieving parity. It is therefore still necessary to address this issue. The lab's qualitative study, which was created in 2016, goes hand in hand with these figures, reminding us that without political measures, the figures cannot change, and that figures and political measures are actually always and strongly linked. As I said, the lab study is made in collaboration and partnership with the EAO since 2020, and also with the EFAD since 2021. Want to make a very special thanks at that point to Julie, Jeanne, Regnault, and Ariel for facilitating our contacts with the institutes. Perhaps just to start, a few words about the Lab Femmes de Cinéma. The lab is a think tank working on parity and mixity in the audiovisual field, both behind and in front of the camera. Our actions are based on 3 pillars. We contribute to create female role models while organizing masterclasses and producing podcasts. We also use collective intelligent tools on our workshops to contribute to transform the industry practices. For instance, this year, we were very much involved in the Respect Group, which was a group created by French professionals to fight against gender-based violence in the French film industry. And last but not least, we conduct this annual qualitative study on measures that are meant to promote gender equality in European cinema in order to raise awareness and to influence institutions.
Next slide, please. Why is this study so important? We know that if women are underrepresented and discriminated in the film industry, it's partly because of 2 obstacles, because of the persistence of gender stereotypes and because of structural exclusion mechanism. And to overcome those 2 obstacles, we need, on the one hand, raising awareness on these issues, deconstructing stereotypes, increase the visibility of women filmmakers. And on the other hand, we need to implement proactive structural impulses to overcome the structural exclusion mechanism. The sheer existence of our study is meant to encourage the implementation of proactive structural impulses among institutes. Next slide, please. And we are going to do a quick presentation of the study. Our study is a qualitative and European study, and the methodology is that every year we contact the various institutes and we ask them to communicate with us on measures and policies they implement to promote parity. The measures, we contacted 36 countries in 2024, and this study is linked with the statistics of the EAO, since the statistics are the point for implementing measures, and the measures are necessary to help the statistic evolve.
Yes, next slides, please. The lab study is at the same time actually an annual assessment of the situation in Europe, and it is also a collection of good practices, a kind of yearly benchmark, really. In fact, with this study, we are offering to the different institutes the opportunity to have a reflexive look onto their policies by comparing them to those that already proved themselves to be effective in other countries in Europe. But the main goal of this study is to actually maintain pressure on the subjects towards the public authorities, the media, and the general public. It is therefore an object of influence as much as of communication.
And next slide, please. Let's start with the synthesis of the study, of this year's study. This year, we have surveyed the institutes to determine if they are already collecting data on gender pay gap and budget disparities across the different professions within the film industry. Among the institutes that responded to our questions on gender pay gap, only 9 of them collect data on gender-based pay differences across the different professions in the film industry. And when it comes to budget disparities between the film directed by women and those directed by men, more institutes are collecting data on this issue, with 15 countries gathering data. Next slide, please.
The two main trends for 2024 follow the major themes of the 2023 study. First, by combating gender-based and sexual violence. We now know for sure that creating a violence-free industry is essential for building inclusivity. Studies show that workplaces with parity experience fewer instances of violence. In this way, combating violence and promoting parity go hand in hand. The various centers' initiatives to fight against GBV include measures to appoint harassment reference on film sets, require production companies to sign charters committing them to taking measures against violence, provide financial support for helplines, promote the role of intimacy coordinators, offer training, compulsory or optional, to producer and film crews, and the publication of best practices, and codes of conduct generally emanating from groups of professionals, like, for example, the Respect Group in France. France is the country that adopted the most various measures to fight against GBV, even if on that subject, of course, we can always go further and deeper. The second main trend of our study this year is integrating parity into broader diversity initiatives. A growing number of countries have adopted national or international initiatives aimed at promoting parity through an intersectional approach to diversity. The various centers' initiatives include action plans, trainings, affirmative actions that prioritize inclusivity at equal project quality, intersectional data collection, which is a very good basis, and also mandatory or optional diversity reports. The United Kingdom, with its diversity standards, is the country which is the most involved and advanced in this trend of measure. Next slide, please.
We are also noticing that a large number of trends show increasing momentum. First, the developing of including a pan-European initiative. 2024 has seen the acceleration of international collaboration, underscoring the potential for cross-border cooperation to enhance inclusion in cinema. For instance, the New Dawn Fund launched in 2022, or a co-development fund for women and non-binary creators that was launched in 2023 by Ireland and Luxembourg. One of the highlights is also the supporting parenthood. Several centers are beginning to introduce incentive policies to support the people with children working in the film industry. These policies are not explicitly linked to gender, but in fact, studies show that having children puts women at greater disadvantage in the world of work. Hence, helping parents leads to greater equality in working conditions between men and women. The measures that are put in place take various forms, such as, for example, making childcare cost eligible when applying for subsidies, setting up childcare system on film shoots, organizing the sharing of tasks between several people to allow individual reduction of working hours. And for example, Austria is very involved in this topic. And next slide, the last highlight of this year's study. It's an older measures, but that are starting to bear fruit. the financial incentive system that aim at encouraging production to include more women in their team, both creative and technical teams, starts to bear fruit. Although this is not a recent trend, the financial incentives that have been put in place for some time are beginning to produce tangible results in terms of statistics. This is why they are one of our highlights in 2024, which gives us the opportunity to underline the importance of these measures to promote parity. For instance, there is the gender incentive in Austria that has some great results, and in France, the CNC has implemented in 2019 with the collective 50-50 a bonus that is awarded to artistic film crew with equal representation. That is to say, when at least as many women and men are in managing position, and in 2021, 2022, and 2023, more than a third of the film that get the funding from the CNC were eligible for this bonus, compared to one out of 4 films in 2025 and 1 out of 5 films in 2019. So this development is the sign of the particularly attractive nature of this measure.
Next and last slide, please. Thank you. To conclude, we've got 3 points, really. First, we would like to remain the temporality of the study, the fact that it is a double temporality between, on the one hand, the figures that reflect the impact of measures taken a number of years ago, and on the other hand, the measures and policies taken this year, the consequence of which will be measurable, but later. Secondly, as Gilles said before, we are very pleased to notice this year an increase in the share of film directed by female across Europe, but it remains very slow and far from linear. What we know for sure is that this recent acceleration can be explained by the policies put in place a few years ago. It is the proof that the measures adopted are starting to bear fruit. So I want to say our efforts pay and must go on. And last, I want to say that today we are so glad that a few talented female directors are put in the spotlight with very successful films. We love to speak about the success of Justine Triet, of Mathilde Diop, Audrey Diwan, Coralie Farja, Julia Ducournau, etc. In France, we have an expression to say that sometimes a tree can hide the forest. The 2 studies we presented today, together with the EAO, can be seen as a reminder. And perhaps the best answer to who consider that the place of women in the cinema industry is no longer an issue. It definitely still is. And that's why we will continue to produce our study. Our study is available online. Don't hesitate to check it out and also to share it. A big thank again to the EAO, particularly to Gilles Fontaine, to the EFAD, especially Julie, Jeanne, Ariel, and Iris, Uni Europa, and notably Daphne Tepper, and also the EVA network for this event. Last but not least, I would like to thank the partners of the lab and of this study, L'Oréal Paris, Studio Canal, the French Ministry of Culture, the CNC, and from this year, Eurimage. And thank you for your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So many interesting insights already from your analysis, and yeah, as you say, le temps long, having time to look at numbers which are not satisfactory, but still we can draw lessons and move forward. And so I guess we'll have many other of those events, right? We are not at the end of the road yet, but hopefully at some point there will be a jump, right? I think we still hope that everything we learn in those years we can push some actions, the ones that bear more fruits and really have a jump. Like, let's still hope for this. So again, if you have questions or comments for Fabienne and Lise, you put them in the chat, or you just ask to take the floor here in the room. You're staying online as well till the end of the session. Great. So if there are questions at a later stage. So we'll now continue the reflection and the thinking, and what we thought would be interesting, as we have the chance to have in the rooms today colleagues from film funds in different European countries around the table here, is to continue our thinking and really think. We have those numbers that are still not, they are very, very interesting and relevant and broadening, but they are still quite top level. So from the experience on the ground in the different countries, can we evaluate the impact of equality strategies? Can we see what actions have the more positive results? Can we start evaluating action plans, gender equality action plans? Because we know that in several countries, they've been around for several years already. So the idea is, how can we continue in the right direction? So I will ask my two colleagues here to say a few words about their national context. I will start with Iris Zapperheller, who is the Deputy Director of the Austrian Film Institute. You've heard Austria several times in both of the presentations, and you are also the chair of the IFAD Gender and Inclusion Working Group. And we know each other very well, and we've been working for many years on all those issues together. So thank you for being here, and I give you the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you all the people who spoke before me. I think it's so important, your work, because figures is really the basis of the whole gender balance issue. And this is exactly what we did in Austria. We started to have a look on numbers in 2013. And the thing was, by that time, we had around 25% of female directors, but which was not bad for that time, but they got only around 12% of the money given from the Austrian Film Institute. And this was mentioned, for example, by Gilles. Women are getting less money, and therefore they are producing films that are not so much seen. So at the Film Institute, we were thinking about how to react on those issues. And the first measure we took, it was already mentioned by Lise, is the gender incentive, because our first gender report stated quite clearly that women are missing in almost all different sectors as head of departments. So this gender incentive has a look on where are women missing, in which head of departments, and they are, when a project comes in for project funding, we have a look on how many women are in those different sectors working as head of departments. And if there are enough women working there, they are getting enough points. And if the project is funding, the company gets 30,000 euro to fund, to develop another project, again with women in key positions. So it was a measure that went on quite slowly, but once it went, it was quite of an avalanche effect, because the money had to be reinvested in projects again with women on board. And we started in 2017, and today 110 projects have been developed within this system. The second pillar of our gender measures is gender budgeting. I think we were really lucky to have a board of management who was very in favor of gender equality, and 2.5, 3 years ago, we got new guidelines. And in these guidelines, it was clearly stated that we had to have a look on the figures, meaning the money we are giving to, once again, projects with women on board. We are following there the Swedish model. And this gender budgeting has foreseen a step-by-step plan coming to 50-50. You might call it a soft quota. Yes, it is. And quota helps. So meanwhile, we are at around 50-50. Of course, we are not always at 50-50. It might change, and this is allowed within our guidelines. Till the end of 24, we are allowed to have a plus or minus of 5%. But the new guidelines for the next year, because we are at around 50-50, and the step-by-step plan is fulfilled by the end of this year. And therefore, the new guidelines for the next year foresee, again, of course, 50-50, but we can switch only 3% up or down. So it's getting much, again, more narrow to 50-50. And I think this is really something we would like to maintain and to keep.
Thank you. So two words I have in mind: persistence and proactivity, right?
Yes.
Being very voluntary in your actions and keeping the direction.
I think you have to be, because I think without a system like this and without keeping an eye on the numbers, it will go down immediately afterwards, because it's not so easy. It's easy to change guidelines, but it's not that easy to change society. And therefore, we have still to keep on working.
Thank you very much, Iris. We'll move to Slovenia. And Natasha Buta, you are the director of the Slovenian Film Center, and you also have developed strong actions for gender equality. So we'll hear from your experience. So I give you the floor, and I will share my screen.
Yes, thank you. Hello, everybody. Yes, Slovenia got its first female-directed long fiction film in 2002, which is super late. And this is where we started with, I have a presentation which I will go through as fast as possible, but just to give you the impression of what is going on in my country. So we did put in 2020 some strategic goals to our policies, which included gender parity in committees, gender balanced policy in funding. Lots of activities were done in raising awareness on gender issues. And one that we did and is super important with the results we got is to analyze yearly statistics with public presentations, which were also raising awareness about how things are, because the statistics, as we heard today lots of times, is the key answer to everybody who doubts the gender policy is not where it should be. We had some goals in 2000. It all started in 2018, when the first ever public discussion on gender issues in Slovenian film sector has been made and prepared. It was actually the presentation of the statistic of historical data of Slovenian filmmaking from the very beginning till 2018. And these facts and figures on gender equality presented what Hannah Slack, as in the picture, our female director, showed so visibly. In the right hand, she has a list of female directors in the history of Slovenian film. And in her left, there is a huge, you see, line of male directors who were making films in the history of Slovenia. So it was basically the statistics as in many other countries, but it was more or less 80 to 90% in each category, male filmmakers, and the rest for the mixed teams, and very few female directors in the history. So we did some soft measures. We never actually implemented quota. Maybe we should then follow the Austrian example across the border. So we don't have the quota. We still do take great care of gender parity in film committees. We are publishing calls for the B films, which Gilles already mentioned. They are successful, but I also believe, as Gilles said, that this is promising a good future for gender parity, because now female directors, they are coming more and more into the sector. One of the things is statistics, of course, and evaluation of yearly support policy through gender, which is then publicly published and spread around to raise awareness. So this is again the results of support policy through years. As we have small number of films, the statistics are much changing a lot, but we've reached in some years even more than half of the projects that were supported for female directors. Those are the B. As Gilles said, it's much better result all through Europe, but here you can see after 2018, quite some years that we got 100% of female the B films supported, which is now bringing results. Here are some films that you might came across by female directors: Hannah Slack that you saw, Sonia Prusens, then documentaries, also strongly present female directors, like the two you see here. And then some more, the documentaries that travel across, that are co-produced by several European countries. And in animation also, we take care of all three pillars. In animation, we also got great successes. As you might know, the Granny Sexual Life won the European Film Award 2 years ago. And what is, this is what is now coming. I hope Gilles' statistics in 2-3 years will be better for Slovenia, as probably the observatory is only calculating on films done, films already shown. So these are the films that are now the results of our work in the gender balance. Funding is coming out within the next 2-3 years. The first very good results, not only new debuts, but also this will be the second film of the director, also the second film of the director. And this is interesting. We looked into the National Film Awards, Slovenian National Film Awards through history, and the results looking back were like this. So 23 awards for best feature film in Slovenia were to male directors, only 3 to female. And this goes all through the awards that are given since 98, as you can see. And this is the result of this year's National Film Awards, which means that all of these, what you see, all of these awards went to female directors. So it was the majority of the National Film Awards in 2024 were given to female-directed films or to female directors in the whole, which is something new compared to the history that was like that. So we got a strong impact of these strategies that we've implemented, and we are moving on with all of this. So we have now more females working in the sector. There's a new generation, especially through the debut film support coming, which is much more gender balanced nowadays. The very important thing is selection committees. The statistic that we did in 2018 showed that very few female members in the selection committees were there. It was mostly men's job. So now we take care of this unconscious bias through the committees. We want to overcome the image of a director, because in my language, the director is a different word for a male as for a female. And talent is everywhere. Of course, this is what everybody today is supporting, that the opportunity is not yet where it should be. And of course, one of the important things is that great stories have universal appeal, and we want to see more representative stories reaching wider audience, also from the females. So this is briefly the result of our equality strategy, which will hopefully bring visible success to our filmmakers also. So.
Thank you so much. Like, again, proactivity leads to results. I give you the floor, Julie-Jeanne.
Yes, it works. Hello. Yes, the floor to say thank you first, Daphne. Just a quick thank you to Daphne, Gilles, Lise, and Fabienne, because it's a unique stock-taking exercise that we can do every year, thanks to you. So without you, we couldn't do it. We couldn't hear these amazing examples that were just presented. And I wanted to mention Spain. We wanted to have our Spanish colleagues with us because they have a very unique initiative that is connected a bit to the Audiovisual and Media Services Directive. You know that in certain countries you have financial obligations. So you have the obligation for, let's say, the TV, but also the online services to invest into new productions. And in Spain, they have a sub-quota, a gender sub-quota. So part of the quota is dedicated to works created by women, films created by women. And that's the only country, I can count 16 European countries with a financial obligation. And this is a unique country, the only one that has a sub-quota, not only for independent or for cinema films, but for female works created by women. And I wanted to mention this example. We've asked our colleagues from ICA if they know already if it has generated investment into those kind of films. And they say, well, it's too early. We cannot share any quantitative impact. But next year, we should have first figures that we would be happy to share. So what is very interesting from our perspective is that when you want to do something, when you want to start doing something for improving promotion, gender parity, you have a toolkit of things that you can do. I mean, we know from Austria, from Slovenia, Spain, I mean, so many other countries, the UK, the Nordic countries. So, I mean, you have the choice and you can always start somewhere. And I think even though we cannot see it very, very clearly in the stats yet, we are moving forward and we are learning from each other. So that's already something I think that can be seen as positive. Thank you again, Daphne.
Thank you very much. Yes, indeed. I think we have a toolkit and we have also a bit of a perspective, which is interesting. We have research, we have a collection of good practices. So it's nice to look back and see where we're at. I also think what's interesting is that when you stabilize some numbers, you can also move to the next level. You know, you work on numbers, you know, how to get more women, but then you can move at, you know, as you do, the different departments in a crew, and you can look at work-life balance, and you can look at access to budget, and you can look at pay gap, and that's really, there is a lot of opportunities to push your action further. Thank you very much for those examples. If you don't have anything to add at this point, we're going to move to the next and last slot of our session today. So first of all, yes, our mic has eyes. I've seen that in the chat, so it's kind of a bit magical here. And also, I want to repeat that this session is recorded, and it will be published on the Cine Europa website, the partner of this session, and there will also be written article about the session, so you'll be able to share or watch the end if you have to leave at any point. So to finish up, we wanted to give the floor to a number of the partner organizations that are behind this event to also give their perspective on the state of play, right? Which with numbers that are disappointing, but then when you look at policies and measures, they are developing and like the direction of travel, right? How do we understand it? How to push it forward, etc. And for that, I wanted to invite 3 colleagues that are online to take the floor for a few minutes. So it will be Alexia, and then Pauline, and then Simon. So I will first invite Alexia Munoz-Ruiz, who is the director of the EVA network, member and partner behind this session since the beginning. So hello, Alexia, speaking from very far away, but thank you for connecting, and I give you the floor.
Thank you, Daphne. Yes, of course, we're very happy to be here to organizing this webinar for the 5th year, because it's very important that we keep on talking. EVA Network started in 2013 when there has been no report about women directors back then, and we immediately knew that it was the first thing to do, to collect numbers and then inspire film institutes to do the same. And thanks to this collection of numbers, now most of film institutes have developed initiatives. However, as taken from what Gilles said, the numbers are rising very, very, very slowly despite all the measures. So we must be really careful and really insist with the reports and all these qualitative studies that the lab is doing. And it's very important, I think, also to bring in the journalists and the media, because I think we, despite these good numbers, and Mati Diop and Julia de Cournot, all the great film directors winning awards, I don't think their names are really widely known. So I think the press, the media should have also to make a double effort in order to make these names as known, as widely known as our male counterparts. So there are many things that we should really look in for and really be vigilant and continue our work. And what to say? Yes, as Julie-Jeanne mentioned, in Spain it has been, nice incentives, really unique. In fact, the results are already here. For the last 2-3 years, there have been more films directed by women, and we expect more, and we expect also results. But as I said, my concern is that these measures should be kept in time. The risk is that they might be a short campaign, a short initiative, and it should be continued, because since, as Simone de Beauvoir said, our rights are never guaranteed. And the fact that now perhaps we can be at 30% of film directors, it doesn't mean that in 2 years will be the same. No, it's coincidental most of the times. Okay, I don't want to to use all the time. I forgot that we have here.
Thank you, Alexia. I just say,
Daphne.
the advocacy, like that's certainly one of the action lines for the future, to continue showing the numbers that are not satisfactory, but also showing the measures that can change the situation, and continue to push for it also in political environments that are not always necessarily, positive for those kind of demands right now. But thank you very much, Alexia. And I will now give the floor to
Thank you.
To Pauline, Pauline Duranvielle, who is CEO of FERA, the representing National Associations of Screen Directors. Pauline, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Daphne. Thank you not only for giving me the floor, but also for the excellent coordination of this event, which at FARA we are very attached to. A 5th anniversary is not nothing in this sort of things, and it gives us quite the opportunity to take stock of what's going on and maybe also think a little bit not only about what these figures mean, but also how we should re-strategize for what's coming next. So it's a bit of two types of trains of thought that we have to work on. And listening to the two great presentations, as always, a few thoughts came to mind. First of all, there is an evolution, which is in itself is a victory. I feel like this is something that maybe sometimes, because we are impatient, we tend to underestimate, but it seems to me like from what both Gilles and Fabienne were describing, what we're observing is actually something that is quite deep, a change that goes really within the belief that it is possible now to have female workers, female creators, female producers that are equally effective, pertinent, and efficient and talented as men. And I think this is something that is not anecdotal. It is something that is definitely worth pursuing with this continuity that Alexia was mentioning. So even if this change does not appear to be structural yet, there are definitely the elements present for it to become structural if we can be persistent and continue this effort in a way that is steady. However, of course, discrimination is still around clearly in terms of access to jobs, access to similar budget for female directors is what I'm thinking in particular, but I think it's true for all the different positions, professions that were described. One thing that seems also very striking from the perspective of the community that FARA represents is that today there is massive risk shouldered by female directors. The fact that they are a minority means that they are actually taking a lot of risks that are not supported by the industry yet in a way that it could be. And our data from an income study from a few years back actually shows that in terms of income and remuneration, there is also a massive gap which adds to this risk-taking from female directors. Another thing that seems an interesting takeaway from all that was described is that public funding and public policy do have an impact and are an efficient leverage. Natasha's presentation on what Slovenia has achieved is actually fascinating, because it means that when you have a consistent strategy that is all-encompassing, you can achieve results as impressive as having the entire national awards taken over by female talent. And that is a very significant result, because that carries, that has an impact on the reputation of female talent over time, not just the individuals, but also the notion that female talent is not a risky talent to invest in, which kind of leads me to my next point, is trying to understand why the progress is slow and what is it that might be leading to stagnation. From our perspective, the very risk-averse nature of our industry is definitely here very clear. That this is the mindset that seems to be problematic. This notion that there is a risk being taken when female talent is taken on board on project is something that is not yet debunked. And Fabienne was talking about I can't find the word, but disconstructing the perception. I think this is something that is very real, particularly for female directors. And we also want to try and investigate in the coming time the difference between the difference of perception between the hard house sector, which is supported by public funding and public policy, and the entertainment sector of the industry, which less supported by public funding and therefore less easy to cover in terms of public policy. So this difference between private investment and public funding and public policy, and how to sort of even that gap a little bit in the next steps. One thing that we will be doing for sure, particularly in Berlin during the festival in February, is that we want to explore why for directors things seems to be so difficult in terms of progress. And it seems to us like there are a few issues that needs to be looked at. Clearly for directors, there is something that has to do with this risk-averse nature of the industry and the responsibility that directors carry on a project, because they are responsible for the delivery of the final work, be it a film, art house film, an entertainment film, or an episode of a TV series. And the perception of women in this particular role seems to be something to dig into further. And here, again, what Slovenia has achieved to us seems like a particularly important step in trying to shift these perceptions that seem to be problematic. We also have key issues to look into further in terms of workflow, the ability to become more professional in this profession, which is particularly difficult to sustain financially. The freelance status of these workers, the remuneration issues, as I mentioned already, and of course, the work-life balance question, which for directors and the specific workflows that they have to face, which is quite uneven, sometimes very intense, sometimes not so much. And the fact that they need to have several jobs to make ends meet, definitely all of that is particularly challenging for female directors. Basically, to wrap up, what I would say is that in strategizing next steps, there are also two things besides digging further into the why we feel need to be looked into. One has to do with the changes in the industry. The production boom is over. We know that there will be a contraction now that will be more and more significant, and the instinct to cut costs will be very present. We also know that technology and AI might come into play, and this is something that we definitely need to be very attentive to, also from the perspective of gender equality. And finally, probably the most challenging one is the shift in the political framework around us and the conservative revolution that seems to be at play across Europe. This will definitely have an impact on policy. And we want to be very aware that this change is coming in order to make sure that we can protect the policies that have already been set into place, that seems to be working, to make sure that they are not washed away by new political perspectives coming into power. So voila, these are in a nutshell the challenges we see and the analysis we want to carry forward. Thank you, Daphne.
Thank you, Pauline. It is a very comprehensive nutshell. I think you have drafted very much the roadmap. I agree with a lot of the directions and priorities you set. I will now invite Simon. Simon Norton is an actor and is the president of Film, which is the trade union in Sweden representing actors, performers, but also all the off-screen, off-stage workers in the sector. And you're also, Simon, the vice president of FIA, the International Federation of Actors, which is one of the partners behind this session. So thank you, Simon. What's your perspective on everything that's been presented today?
Thank you for having me, and thank you for such a brilliant seminar. Yes, I'm Simon Norton, as you said. We also organize directors and intimacy coordinators, and I used to say everyone in front of and surrounding the camera, so more or less the industry. We need to organize. That would be my base note. We in FIA we have since Me Too worked a lot, of course, with intimacy coordination and such to create safe work behind the camera. But we also see the slow change. it reminds me when we in Sweden, we had no female theater leaders in 25 years ago. And the note was that women don't want to become leaders. That was the common state. And we decided we make an education for female leaders. And now the majority of the theater leaders are women. So if we can educate, we can also be the change. We do see a shift behind the camera in Sweden when it comes to traditionally male professions like DOPs, gaffers, and grip and such. But the change is quite slow. And we see how female workers value themselves and their time less than men. This needs to be acknowledged by us as unions, of course, but also from the employer side. If we are to create some kind of gender equal pay, freelancers and especially self-employed have a hard time to stand their ground and get paid for their work. In the numbers from 2023, we see that 47% of the directors are women, 48% of the writers, and 46% of the producers. It's quite high numbers. And they are even higher if we look at documentary. But if we look at high budget, they are significantly lower in favor of the male directors. We also have a strong tradition in Sweden to solve our issues together with the employers. We don't trust so much on legislation. We trust our collective agreements to solve the issues. But I know this is a practice that's not functioning in every country. But I think that's where we've been most successful when we've produced guidelines for intimacy coordination, for example, together with the producers. They're supported also by the employers. So that's, of course, if you can establish those practices, it's really, really valuable. We've done also follow-up surveys after Me Too, and the numbers are not so good, I think. Of course, we've risen awareness, so that's part of the numbers being high still, but 49% of the workers who have been victimized in any kind have not spoken to anyone about it. 49%, that's really troubling. So we have a strong code of silence in our workplaces. So we really need to work preventively together with the employers to create safe workplaces where it doesn't happen. I think this is really important, especially for our industry with so many freelancers and short contracts for our workers. But just to finish up, in Sweden, we have a strong parental insurance, giving parents 480 days of parental leave to share between them. It's huge in an international comparison. But for the first time since we've started to measure the gender gap when it comes to pay, the gap is increasing in Sweden. And this is, of course, to be analyzed. It's part of cost of living, inflation and such. But also connecting to what Pauline said, this is also part of the political agenda. We have strong political initiatives in Sweden as well in all over Europe, with far-right conservatives trying to enforce more traditional family values, fighting the gains we've had traditionally when it comes to gender equality. And this spring, we're renegotiating all our collective agreements in Sweden. I think the focus will be on work-life balance. We see that we tend to do more for less, and it hits harder on women and the ones with weak employment contracts. It's almost impossible to combine film and television work on set with being a young parent, for example, and we're losing senior competence. So we need to organize, work for safer conditions on set, and keep a track on those numbers, because statistics are funny in that way that they can be used in almost any way. So we really need to penetrate the numbers to see what they're really saying. But thank you again for this brilliant seminar and for the opportunity to say something. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon. So I wanted to just also add, because I fully agree with you, Simon. I think as trade unions, we of course think that part of the solution is very much in social dialogue and collective bargaining. But I also want to say that across Europe, we see, especially in the current political environment, the importance of public policies, of public schemes, and also of legislation at some levels that can reinforce collective bargaining or facilitate also collective bargaining. And this is the case, for example, and I will just want to wrap up the meeting with that, is the question of access to funding and gender pay gap. It popped up several times during this meeting. And we believe that it's time that we address that issue very seriously, because we see that on budget, we have an issue. Women director or women work on projects that have lower budgets. We have numbers to prove that. We have some numbers across Europe to also show there is a strong gender pay gap across the departments of our industry, of course, not benefiting women, on the contrary, and important pay gaps. But there is also EU legislation. Mrs. Rafowicz mentioned it in the beginning on the Pay Transparency Directive, that as it is, cannot fully work in our sector, which is a sector with a majority of small-scale employers and a lot of freelancers, but its principle and philosophy should be applied and could have an impact in our sector as well. So we really invite everyone interested to look at, put it in the chat, to look at the documents we produced, and to continue working on that aspect too, next to work-life balance and caring duties, next to women in leadership, next to all the topics that were addressed today. So thank you so much to everyone, to Mrs. Rafowicz for being and opening the meeting, to Gilles, Lise, and Fabienne for presenting the latest reports, to Iris and Natasha for their insight from Austria and Slovenia, and then finally to Alexia, Pauline, and Simon, and Julie-Jeanne, and Ariel, and everyone else for being great partners. And see you next year, right? We agree. See you next year, but see you before. I'm sure the work continues, of course, in between those meetings. And for everyone online, don't hesitate to reach out if you have information you want to share, if you want to be put in touch with partners. Collective action is what will help us, I hope, here, like on any other issues. And thank you to the interpreters, and thank you to Vincente for the technical support. Have a nice day. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.